Hey there, Johannes Keating here. My days in Colorado are numbered, and so I'm taking the office apart. So I figured I'll leave the camera off to spare you the sight of the chaos around me. But I thought I'd leave you with this beautiful image of the view from my backyard capturing the foliage here in Colorado this time of year. Today's topic is about striking the right balance between giving the patient the benefit of the doubt, allowing room and space for genuine productive responses, allowing room and space for the patient to really grapple with themselves and try to respond meaningfully, and confronting resistance when it begins to obscure the work and can no longer be left unaddressed. I'll be using the opening of the case of the German architect from Unlocking the Unconscious, page 9, to highlight some of the most important principles when it comes to ISTDP. Without these understandings, your work will truly suffer. So without further ado, let's dive in. So here we are, page 9 of Unlocking the Unconscious, the case of the German architect. I'll just be reading from the transcript. I'll skip the introduction, and then I'm going to offer my color commentary as we go. Descriptive phenomenological approach, immediate resistance. Therapist, this is the very beginning of the first session. Therapist, could you tell me what seems to be the problem that you want to get help for it? Patient, no, not exactly. This is one, and then I'm here now, right? So you don't know exactly what the problem is, hmm? Patient, I'm here. I only have some hazy idea what might be the problem. Therapist, now if I question you, what seems to be the difficulties that you have, what then would you say there? Because you're saying you have a hazy idea about your difficulties, which is patient, which I'm not sure whether those difficulties are my normal part of being human, however, therapist. So you have several difficulties that you question if it is normal or. So what I want you to notice in terms of this section that I just read is that the way Davenlu is probing and inquiring into the nature of the patient's difficulties, it involves giving the patient the benefit of the doubt, and it involves trying to reflect back to the patient what Davenlu believes himself to have heard from the patient. So he's not camping out at the station of defense identification. He's not yet referring to the patient's vagueness. When he reflects back the idea that you have a hazy idea here, right? That's simply using the patient's own language. Okay. So the patient is not very clear whatsoever, right? And yet, Davenlu is not yet trying to point out defenses. He's simply asking follow-up questions, trying to elicit greater clarity, and trying to reflect back to the patient what the patient is saying. Okay, onward. In answer to the question, could you tell me what seems to be the problem? What emerged was that the patient is vague, ruminates, and wants to intellectualize about whether his difficulties are normal or abnormal. It became evident immediately that a descriptive phenomenological approach would not be meaningful. So now we have clarifying defenses, some degree of communication. The patient clearly wanted to intellectualize about the causes of his difficulties. Therapist, yeah, but you see, let me question you this. You're now moving to the cause of it before you tell me what the problem is. Do you notice that? Okay. So pausing now from the reading. So here he pivots, okay, because it became clear after a few different attempts to get more clarity from the patient that it wasn't going to go anywhere. So now Davenlu begins to pivot, but it means that initially he gave him the benefit of the doubt. He didn't just immediately say, well, this is vague. Okay. He kept asking clarifying questions. He kept trying to reflect back to the patient what he was hearing the patient say. And then only when it becomes clear that that is truly not going to be productive, now he pivots. Okay. But first, he gives the patient the benefit of the doubt. He gives him a little bit of space to see if he can do it. And then, when it's clear that resistance is obscuring the path too much, okay, well, then now he pivots. Okay, onward. Patient, oh, yeah, I understand that. You see, my question was, what are the difficulties that you have? But now you're moving to the issue of the cause. Okay, this is Davinlu's defense work right here. Patient, no, I'm not. I'm simply explaining that now you're becoming slow. I beg your pardon? No, I'm trying to say that it becomes a more plausible thing with a more plausible cause when you realize, yeah, but you see, this is very vague. You see, you say the question that I had was what seems to be the difficulties. And so far, you're in a sense ruminating in a vague fashion on no, I'm not. I've definitely said I have a problem with commitment. And that very much came home when I discovered the same problem elsewhere in people related to me who have the same background. Okay, so now here, notice Davin's response to this here. So, one problem that you have has to do with commitment. This is really significant. In other words, instead of just harping on how the patient was vague and just camping out with defense work, he's responding to this new development where the patient is now actually declaring something genuine, which is that he has a problem with commitment. Okay? This is absolutely essential. The Davenlu isn't just rigidly going to this idea, well, now I'm doing defense work, so I better stay here. No, he's responsive. The patient is becoming a bit more forthcoming and clear that there's a problem with commitment. And so Davenlu reflects that back. So one problem that you have has to do with commitment. And then the response here. Yes, but don't forget that, of course, it took me many, many years to even realize that I had a problem there. I mean, I've been plodding in the dark for almost as long as I've been alive. Which brings up another point. Maybe I have a problem with feelings. Okay, I'm not going to read the entire commentary by Davinlu, just the very beginning part here. The therapist has clarified with the patient his vagueness and his tendency to ruminate. What emerged was that he has a great many characterological problems. He made two significant communications, plotting in the dark and problems with feelings. But both of these communications are themselves vague. The therapist follows the line and focuses on the patient's problems with feelings, at the same time pointing out the defense. So, what I hope is coming into focus for you here is this delicate balance between giving the patient the benefit of the doubt, asking follow-up questions, asking for elaboration and for greater clarity, and reflecting back to the patient what has been said by the patient. And then only when it becomes clear that the resistance is simply getting in the way too much of the therapist being able to get a clear picture of what seems to be the problem, then the focus becomes on the resistance. But even at that station, it's not a permanent fixed station. As soon as the patient is able to bounce back to an extent and become more clear and more forthcoming, Davenlu will take what he can get. So then he says, so there's a problem with commitment. Okay, and then they're off and running again until resistance again gets in the way too much. And so the principle is first, give the patient the benefit of the doubt. Give them some time and space to grapple with themselves and try to produce clarity in terms of the inquiry into the nature of their difficulties and their feelings and so forth. And then also through that process, continuously reflect back to the patient what the patient is saying. And then when that becomes too unproductive and it's like pulling teeth. Then, and only then, do you pivot to do the defense work. So these were the principles that I wanted to highlight today. I believe that if we can incorporate these understandings, it will exponentially improve our work. Thanks for spending some time with me today, and we'll see you in the next video.